A warm good afternoon to each and everyone present here today. I, Sakshi Chauhan, event manager of GDSC PHCET, is very pleased to extend a cheerful welcome to you all for a Google Developer Students Club first official event on Google Cloud. To start off, I would like to welcome our HOD, Rohini ma'am, and our faculty coordinator, Neetu Pillai ma'am, without whom this events would have just been an idea. As we all know, Google Cloud Platform, also known as GCP, offered by Google, is a suite of cloud computing services that runs on the same infrastructure that Google uses internally for its end user products. It provides a series of modular cloud services, including computing, data storage, data analytics, and machine learning. So, to influence your direction of cloud computing and build products at the forefront of the new era of technology, today we have Mr. Dharmesh Vyasar. He is the Google Developer Expert for Cloud Platform and Payments, as well as he is the Cloud Solutions Architect with 14 years of experience, and he manages GDG Cloud Mumbai. Also, if you want to connect with him on LinkedIn, the link would be provided in the follow-up email. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. Your questions would be answered surely at the end of the session. With that being said, we welcome you, Dharmesh. Over to you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Sakshi, for the introduction, and thanks again to DSC at Pillai College and the staff and the faculty for inviting me. Really glad and pleasure for me to speak at your event. So with that, let us get started. And as Sakshi mentioned, I would be giving you a brief walkthrough, a brief talk around what GCP is, where you can use it in your projects, maybe from even from a career perspective, how do you kind of grow as a cloud engineer and eventually maybe as a cloud architect as well. So I will start on those lines, and with that, let me share my screen. Yeah, I have started my sharing. Can someone confirm in the chat if you're able to see that?
Yes, sir. Is it visible?
Okay. So yeah, let's get started on cloud computing with GCP. All right. So yes, as my introduction was rightly mentioned, I am like Dharmesh. I work as a senior solutions architect, and I'm a Google developer expert. Now also a champion innovator into cloud and payment space. Um, and just as we mentioned earlier, just a bit of housekeeping or a bit of hygiene around this talk. I would suggest that if you'll have any questions, please post it in the chat, and I would definitely try and answer them at the end of the talk, or if it's relevant, we will do it within the session itself. Would suggest that you all be on mute so that I don't get distracted, or if there is something we would want to discuss as a question, we can do that at the end as well. All right, so with that, let us get started on what exactly is cloud computing. I believe like someone's mic is on. Can you all mute that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, so we start where exactly we're going from a cloud perspective. What exactly is cloud computing? And with that, we would want to understand that where does it actually lead to? So the first and foremost thing that we are talking about, that it is basically an on-demand self-service. So what do I say about like on-demand? So I would always kind of take cloud from a resource perspective, that see you all are consuming something like power, electricity, and so on, correct? Like this is like obviously on demand. You get it by default with the home. You get it like by default as a connection, when you take a new home, new office, or anything. So that is something of a de facto service. So it's not that you obviously you have to pay to that separate service provider for the resources that you consume, which means that it is like a shared resource from somewhere, and you are consuming for your services. So just take cloud also from that perspective. Now, if you let's assume for now that you kind of equate it to an analogy of a power supplier, like an electricity supplier, and now you try to understand all the blocks or all the bullets that I have mentioned over here. In that case, just can you give me 1 second? I think there is some noise. Let me break that. 1 minute. Okay, sorry for that. All right, yeah. So we were talking that, okay, if you kind of equate, cloud computing to something like an electricity grid or a water grid or something of that sort, you will be able to easily understand, how it exactly works. So first of all, it is on demand. Whereas, like, I mean, obviously in electricity, there would be something of a human intervention. You would need access to those wirings, those resources and everything. But as compared to cloud, like, I mean, there would be like kind of minimalist human interactions that are there. It does not mean that, as cloud engineers or as cloud developers, you would how to interact with the cloud components as such, but from the data center perspective, you are like kind of totally isolated from there. You are sitting over here, I'm sharing something on Zoom. It is via like, I mean, it's running on Google Slides. It is something sitting somewhere in a data center in Europe or maybe US, and we are all consuming it. So we are not bothered, or we are not concerned that where exactly that data center is. Likewise, if you talk in terms of network access, as I said, that it is a wide global network that is kind of available to us, and we can access it from anywhere. It's not like, I mean, I'm comparing it with the electricity grid, but yes, that is more at a regional level, and cloud is more at a global level. There are cloud service providers which operate only at a regional level as well, and within the cloud service providers as well, you would get services which are specific to a particular region. Next comes resource pooling. So now here you try to understand again from the electricity grid perspective. So we are consuming power from the national grid, correct? And that national grid is kind of capable to produce like tons of megawatts of energy. We don't want everything. I mean, as a household, as an office, we might just want a few kilowatts or something of that sort, and that is what exactly we are going to consume. So there is a large pool of resources capable to share power or the resources to a wide range of users, wide type of users. So some users, like, they might require a 3-phase connection, some might use a single phase connection, and so on. So likewise, if you talk in terms of cloud, again, some might want to have a low compute kind of a resource, some might want a high compute, some might want a high memory utilization, and so on. So different types of consumption patterns based on the persona of the users, the persona of the application that is being hosted on a cloud platform. uh, the cloud platform will be capable to kind of provide that level of resource pooling. Again, as I say, in terms of resource pooling, since a wide range is available, it also means that you can scale up your resources as and when required. So that means that it has rapid elasticity. Again, now let's take an example. So this Zoom call, let's say it was capable to support, say, 100 people or 100 audiences. Now, if I say that now it has to be made such that it can like handle 500 resources or 500 people. Do I change anything from the application side of things? No, it is from the server side, from the cloud provider side, that I'm going to increase the memory, the CPU, and so on. And it is going to allow that many number of users to join in. Same way, when it comes to cloud, it is the elasticity of the cloud provider to kind of scale up and even scale down as and when required, thus saving you cost and resources as well. And in the end, we all get our electricity bills, which means we also would get our cloud bills as well. And it is like a measured service. So you actually pay for what you consume. You keep your AC on running throughout the night, throughout the day, 24 hours. You are going to get a huge dent in your monthly bills, which means that same way, if you kind of keep your VMs keep continuously running, when even it is not in use, you are going to get a dent in your cloud bills as well. So it's like a monthly build, depending on how you have kind of consumed them. You would get appropriate bills and appropriate cost for that, which you can obviously manage and cut down as and when needed. So that's a very brief touch point about, like, what exactly is cloud, how we are kind of getting into that. Now, let's kind of take a step back and say that how exactly did we get there and where are we actually going? So, maybe like a few, decades back, obviously cloud was not really a concept at that time, but then always like these resources or these computational capabilities were there. Now, these computational capabilities were mainly in the form of physical data centers or co-located data centers. Okay, so here it was like mainly like storage, processing, memory, and networking. And trust me, like these are still the fundamental building blocks for any cloud provider as well. Now, when they were like physical data centers, like what happened is like you get a, I mean, just take an analogy of of a shared office space or something like that. Okay, or like your private office space. You are going to build an office ground up. You are going to set all the infrastructure for that. You are going to yourself manage everything. You are going to configure how and where do you want the lightings, how and where do you want the water connections, and so on. Now that is more like a physical data center, physical co-located data centers. You configure yourself, you manage yourself, and you maintain by yourself. Then comes the era, maybe a decade or a couple of decades back, about virtualized data centers. So that is like the closest point where we felt that, okay, cloud is kind of now like kind of coming into market. It is there for you to be made available. And now consider this more like say for example, something like a WeWork kind of an office space. Everything is ready for you. You go sit there, buy a hot desk, and you consume all the resources. So it's like a virtualized environment for you. Not exactly virtualized, it's a physical space for you, but then you don't manage anything by yourself. The provider manages everything and maintains everything. You only configure as per yourself. So you say that, okay, I want 10 seats over there. I'll go and consume that many. Same way for the virtualized cloud providers or data centers, you are kind of responsible for only the pieces that you kind of account for. And again, they are provider managed, which means that you as a user are not responsible to bring in the power supply, bring in the required connections, the hardware stack or anything. The service provider is going to do that. Now comes the era of serverless cloud platforms, which means that the latest generation or the next generation of platforms are heading towards more of a serverless environment, where you as a developer, as a consumer, are not completely responsible, but you are only responsible for the application under your scope. And the services itself are so isolated or so abstracted that you even don't worry about what is running under the hood. You just go ahead, deploy your application, the rest is kind of taken care of. So that's where we are kind of heading into, and you don't even have to configure how much memory is required, how much CPU is required. There are provisions to do that, but that's not really the mandate or the essential part to do that. And it is highly automated, I would say. So as soon as a traffic spike comes up into, say for example, Pillai's college website, and it understands that there is a huge burst of traffic coming in. How do I kind of manage? It automatically scales up the servers by itself. So it's so automated that as an end user, you don't even have to worry about that, or you don't have to know about how it is running under the hood. But yes, as cloud engineers, as cloud developers, as architects, you would be kind of responsible to run these serverless applications, to do all the configurations required for that, to monitor them, to log everything, to account for the right level of services and so on. And obviously it's in the end, it's going to be a cost benefit analysis as well. So you need to understand how much cost you are saving over there, whether serverless is a good option for you, or you want to do the managed services way or not. So that's how, like we're kind of progressing from a physical data center world to a highly automated or a serverless world. Now, talking of like specifically GCP. Now, well, although I'm talking more about GCP over here, but the concepts which I'm talking about, they apply to any cloud provider for that matter, and it does not really kind of uh, say that no, this does not work for AWS, or it does not really work for Azure or Alibaba or Oracle or somewhere. So what we are highlighting over here is the fact that from a compute perspective, so that is the core fundamental building block of any cloud platform. So there are so if you see from this slide towards the left hand side, the icons that you are seeing, compute engine, Kubernetes engine, and we'll stop there. So that is more of a managed infrastructure, which means you as an end user get to manage what is the stack that you want to use, what is the level of configuration that you need, and so on. Whereas if you see towards the right hand side of this picture, let's even consider App Engine into that, Cloud Functions, Cloud Run, or any of the managed APIs that you see, whether you call it like BigQuery, Cloud ML, or translation APIs, and so on. These are automated APIs, or APIs that are kind of readily exposed, available from the cloud platform, and you would actually directly consume this as services. So which means that the underlying infrastructure for these services, App Engine, Cloud Functions, Cloud Run, or any of the APIs, you don't worry about the infrastructure running under the hood. So it is more or less like a dynamic infrastructure where you do not have to touch the infrastructure at all. You consume them as a SaaS product or as a service, and then directly use it in your applications. So that's how like the compute services are kind of divided into like GCP, and not just GCP, like more or less it's very much similar across the platforms as well. So if I have to talk about the major blocks of the fundamental areas into GCP, so there is compute, there is storage. Remember, like the first blocks or the first slide that we're seeing, it was like around compute, storage, networking, and the processing capabilities. So here also, like compute and storage, again they form the fundamental elements as such. And if I talk about compute specifically, so there is something called compute engine, which is nothing but your VM services. You just run a virtual machine, whether you want to run an Ubuntu, whether you want to run a Windows machine, so on. There is Kubernetes engine. So so again, like Kubernetes engine is quite a complex topic in itself, and I would not deep dive into that, but just to understand that it is a highly scalable model of compute services, and it is kind of a very efficient way of running your applications. Now these applications are typically microservices based architecture applications, web applications, custom APIs that you are running, and so on. Okay, and these the Kubernetes engine helps you manage the scalability aspects, the efficiency of running these applications, and so on. To in fact, like I would say that if you all are keen to understand these modernized application architectures, attend DevFest 2021. I'll share it in the end as well, and I am also speaking on the Kubernetes engine as well to share a deep dive into it and how it actually works. The other aspects around compute is App Engine, Cloud Functions, which are they are more like serverless products. You don't worry about what the underlying infrastructure is, but you kind of do only your application deployment on it, and it kind of takes care of it. So Cloud Function again is more like an HTTP endpoint, and it works more like a hosted service for you. Then comes storage. We'll not go each block by block, but I would say that if you want to take, you can take a snapshot of this, explore each and everything fits, find out where what fits together, and try to understand where it helps. So if I have to just tell you, like cloud storage is nothing but a drive for you just like Google Drive, you kind of store all your application, it can be images, it can be media files and so on. Cloud SQL is like your database. Cloud Spanner is also a type of database, but it's meant for like a high availability or a large data set computation issues that you want to solve for. And similarly, Cloud Data Store has its own usage, its own use cases. When it comes to the other areas, like the modernized applications would be using is obviously like big data and machine learning. And again, for like big data, there are platforms or there are tools and services which kind of help you with a data engineering pipeline or a data engineering project. So what does it require? It requires ingestion, it requires transformation, processing, and in the end, warehousing or analytics. So BigQuery is the warehousing piece. PubSub would be the ingestion piece. Dataflow would be something of a transformation area. Dataproc again is more between like batch processing, stream processing, and so on. And data lab is more like, again, you want to try different types of data sets. How do you kind of play around with that and so on? So that is where like big data, services come into picture. And in the end, like I would say, like there are a lot of services around machine learning that are readily available. Just to share some story around this, you would have already used, you might be using something like Google Photos or the Google Drive APIs, the search APIs and everything. So as end users, right? So how does, you sometimes get, within your Google Photos, you get memories from say 4 years ago or so on. Okay, how does it identify that, okay, there were like mountains into this, or there were like cars into a particular photo, or you had visited a particular place? So how does all that happen? So that happens by these machine learning APIs that are available. And it's the same APIs that are also used by the current applications under Google, which means that it is the same piece of code that is exposed to you, that is made available to you. You use it in the best possible way as you need it for your application. So there is natural language, there is vision API, there's speech API, translate API, all something that you use on a day-to-day basis. But then this is for you to use in your applications the way you want to design them. Okay, so it's like you are given the power, you find out how do you want to utilize that. Okay, but then we would want to also understand that how do we actually use it? Like, how do we use cloud? So just take an example that like, what does it take to deploy an application? So you need two major things, right? The first thing is your product or your service, which is your code. And the second thing is infrastructure, the server. Now, the first thing, you are going to be the experts. You are responsible for, those products, those services, and the code. Okay, and it doesn't matter like in what technology you are writing that, whether it is Java, Angular, C Sharp, Python, wherever it is. Everything is mostly like kind of supported by all the cloud platforms, or all the specifically even from a GCP perspective. And what does GCP provide you? The infrastructure or the actual servers where you're going to run the code. So then let's try to understand what are some of those GCP services from an maybe an API perspective, and what is something that you can start using it from like day zero or day one, and then make the best out of it. So you would be surprised to know that while just before this talk, like I was trying to find out like how many APIs does actually Google provide. So there are like almost 200 plus, and maybe it's like even growing as we speak. So these products or these APIs are ranging right from like, you can say, maps, translation, speech, anything related to image processing, audio video processing, and so on. So there are a lot of APIs that are available, and it's just a matter of like, how you kind of think of a use case to utilize them. So how do you find these APIs? So you just have to go ahead into the cloud console or the cloud platform, and you should be able to just find for API library, and those APIs are kind of available freely over here. You just have to enable them. So let's kind of go through some of these APIs. What are they meant to do? Maybe some of these APIs you can even think of using it for your maybe your projects or for your self-learning processes as well. So which is like the first one, like let's touch upon something called natural language processing. So these days, like there are a lot of applications that require you to process a huge chunk of text. Okay, so this text can be either like, something like books, it can be something like research papers, it can be even news articles, it can be social media feeds, anything. So you want to understand what is the analysis that I can do on these type of or this volume of text that I can do. So there are a lot of things that you can do on that. You want to understand the sentiment of that, which means that, okay, if I write a particular sentence, I want to find the mood behind that, whether it's a passive, it's a positive sentence or not, whether it's a negative sentence. If there are any kind of entities listed into that. Entities are nothing but it allows you to it's just like identifying the figure of speech out of it. So whether there are any nouns, whether there are any what is the sentiment of the entity. So I really am not able to come up with an example, but yeah, I can say that, okay, this is a beautiful tree. So what is the entity over here? It's a tree. What is the entity sentiment? It's like beautiful. So just try to relate them to your common grammar and figure of speech and so on. Probably that's why you are also being taught business communication, figures of speech, parts of speech, and so on. And now try to relate it to the technology world around these kind of natural language processing. So everything is important to learn as well. So this kind of textual parsing processing is something that you can readily do with NLP, and that is where it becomes very helpful. So you don't have to write algorithms from scratch to identify what is a figure of speech, what is a part of speech, what is a noun, verb, adverb, adjective, and so on. This actually readily gives you everything. The next one would be like Vision API. So again, like it is something that you all might be, de facto using it on a day-to-day basis, perhaps using like Google Photos, or you want to extract some text out of an image. Vision API kind of readily helps you with that, even if you like kind of even now, if you kind of take your phone screen to this slide, it will easily parse all the text inside that and give you a text output. You can actually copy paste the text from here as well. So it helps you, again, not just from parsing the text or visualizing the text, but it also helps you understand what is the emotion in that, whether it's there are any positive sentiments around that, and everything is kind of pre-trained, readily available for you. There are a lot of ML algorithms already in use by Google. It's the same which is made available via the Vision API. Again, yes, what does like it actually consist of? So there is something like face detection, landmark detection, logo detections, text detection, again, web entities, something like, if there is a particular crop that you would like to do so that, you get the best picture out of it. So it also allows you to do that. Plus it also allows you to do detection around explicit content. So say, for example, there are applications which require you to process a lot of images from external audiences, something like a social media platform, and you want to tag or mark anything that is explicit. This can actually help you do that. Similarly, now like we did a lot of image processing. Now taking a step further, it would be video intelligence. So it's like kind of planned that almost 30-40% of the earth is like kind of governed or watched or by some sort of a camera here and there. But then how do you find what is happening into it, or what is relevant into it? So these video intelligence APIs actually allow you to understand that what is there into this stream, what is the type of objects. If, say, for example, there are vehicles that are breaking traffic rules, how do you identify them, what locations they are? Even from, say, for example, a media or an OTT platform perspective, if you want to kind of identify that, okay, say, for example, there is a movie, and as an OTT platform, I want to find which movie is being kind of watched the highest time, within that movie, which scene is being watched for the highest time. So say, for example, I'm watching my favorite movie like Lagan, and I want to, watch only the ending game of it. How do I come to know about whether only this piece is being watched the highest number of times? So video intelligence is something that might help you achieve that. Next comes the translation API. No, I would say brainer in explaining this. It's like very simple. You kind of bring an image, bring a text that you need to translate. And I'm sure like you have used this like hundreds and tons of time into different walks of life to kind of translate, into different languages, I'm sure. So then I would say that where exactly do you start with? So now there is a plethora of information available. There is, a platter served to you in the form of the cloud platform. It allows you to do various services, various applications. There is infrastructure available, but then in the end, where do you start? Or where do you start learning from? So I mean, I'm sure like you all, everyone knows that right now it's all virtual world, and the only place to learn is your browser. So use your browser first of all. Create an account and your project on GCP. It gives you like $300 of free credits. Obviously, you need to link a payment instrument, but I'm sure like if you can, like link any one payment instrument, even Indian debit cards are nowadays probably allowed, so you can use them as well. Try the product page or go to the product page that you want. There is ample documentation that is listed over there. Try those products. Use Cloud Shell, which means that you don't need any kind of heavy infrastructure or a fancy laptop or a fancy machine. In fact, Cloud Shell can be opened within your mobile phones also, just in case you worry about that. Okay, you need a heavy configuration laptop to run things, but no, that's not really the case. Cloud Shell now provides you an inbuilt editor as well, so which means that you really don't have to worry about downloading anything or installing heavy loaded softwares on your machines. Everything is there in your browser. So that's why I always mention, use your browser and you should be able to do that. And yes, of course, if you prefer working in the local environment, the Google SDK is there. Just by using a command, you can actually run a lot of things. So then where do you learn from? So there are ample like Google learning programs. Some of the programs, I'll just list them down over here. So there are like training discounts or free labs that are available. Maybe if you want, you can take a snapshot of this. YouTube, obviously, there are a lot of things available on YouTube. Make the best out of it to find out. There are a lot of learning channels available. The GCP learning channel, there is a getting started playlist. There is a GCP essentials playlist. Maybe a shameless plug that, we run our own channel called GDG Cloud Mumbai. We have made like short bursts of videos to learn almost all the products and services that I kind of like spoke about. So something like Compute, BigQuery, or Cloud Run, PubSub, or any of the services that you can think of, right? We have made very short bursts of videos so that you don't have to watch a 1 hour long tutorial. We have made it like short tips and tricks, like 6 minute, 7 minute videos, which you can utilize and upskill yourself. So you can just use them on the go, traveling anywhere. And then how do you practice? Like there is something called Quick Labs that is available. It really gives you a very nice hands-on feel, hands-on platform for you. It has a guided lab for any like Google projects and resources, and so the code is also available over there. So you just have to follow the steps, understand the steps, not just like blindly copy pasting. Otherwise, even like school kids can do that. But your intention is to be career ready, to become professionals in your respective fields, and then take it. So just learn it from a tutorial aspect and apply it for any applications that you can think of. Okay. And yes, there is like Coursera as well. So it has like kind of even like you can take those certificates from there, and a lot of folks like kind of have started validating or acknowledging those certificates, and you can share it across. But then, okay, there is still a virtual world, and you still want to learn from, the conference way of working and the conference way of learning. So then go ahead and register for DevFest India 2021. And not just the DevFest India, there are a lot of global DevFest also that are happening. So the India one, I would say specifically, is happening from October 22 to 24. It's going to be online, live, free for everyone. You can have tracks ranging from like web applications, mobile applications, cloud platforms. There are even like certain like community sessions or soft skill building sessions as well. So if you are even a total beginner into not just cloud, but any like overall technology world as well, right? So you can kind of learn from these sessions. And of course, there are swags, there are prizes for winners. There is like quizzes every day. And moreover, you get to like kind of learn and network with a lot of individuals. So join me. I am also going to be there for these 3 days throughout the sessions, available on chat, available on there are channels which have been which will be published so that you can interact with us or Googlers as well. So make the best use of that as well. So with that, like I would say, go ahead, try it out for yourself. Cloud, although I mean, as I said, like there is going to be a bill for that, but it is like there is a lot of free resources available. Just hit cloud.google.com, use your browser, and make the best out of it. So with that, I would conclude the session and open the floor for any questions. I can be reached on LinkedIn at Dharmesh Vaya, or you can follow me on Twitter at DRVAYA. Mostly responsive on Twitter and LinkedIn as social media handles. And that's it from my side. Once again, thanks to the Google DSC at Pillai College and the staff and faculty for inviting me, letting me share, speak my experience, my knowledge, and hope you have like kind of enjoyed listening to me. Yeah, so I'll open the floor for questions, and we can make it like as interactive as possible. And then feel free to ask anything around cloud, tech, or maybe if you want to, get acquainted to any technology platforms, you want to join the community, how does it do that? Okay, so yes, there is a question coming in, and I'll take it as, does Google Cloud Storage provide API for different programming languages like Python or Java? Yes, it does. So if you just open the documentation, it has for Python, Java, Go, Node.js, I mean JavaScript as well. So I mean all the major languages are covered. So you can use it anywhere, any of the applications as such. So yes, they are available. Maybe if someone wants to even like ask questions by like an audio chat as well, we can do that. Can we integrate this cloud APIs in Android Studio? 100% yes, Rishabh. It is meant to be. So when you say Android Studio, you mean to say within an application, if I'm not wrong. So yes, within an application, they are definitely made to be available, made to be integrated. They are designed in a manner that they can be used with mobile applications as well. So if you are considering that, oh, will it make my application heavy? Will it require additional SDKs? No, it does not make it that heavy. It's just a matter of calling the right endpoints, the right APIs, and it still works as well. So irrespective of what versions or what platform you're using, not just Android, even in the Apple ecosystem, these APIs can be integrated. Any other questions? feel free to ask. Yeah, does Firebase and Cloud Firestore come under Google Cloud as well? So technically, yes, I would say, because the billing as such is handled within the cloud platform itself. But yes, it might have a different web UI or a console as such. So Firestore might have it, within the console itself. But Firebase, yes, it has a different console. But yes, if you see from how Google kind of has considered these products, they would all fall under the cloud platform itself. Okay, are APIs provided by, so Nishant has a question that are the APIs provided by Google Cloud available for online, or we can use it for our local environment? So okay, so you mean to say that you want to use them locally, okay, for your testing or for your local deployments as such. So there are two aspects to this. You can consume these APIs on your local systems, okay, not just from the cloud platform, because these APIs come with SDKs. I mean, the Google Cloud SDK is available, which means that you can run run these APIs locally as well. However, the APIs are going to hit the cloud endpoints itself, which means on the cloud platform, but they are going to be consumed at a local level. So you can consume it locally as well, but not in an isolated manner. You would require a network and internet connection and so on, because it is going to hit those endpoints only. You can't, it's not like an direct SDK. You download something, run it on your local, not that way. It has to make a connection to the cloud platform. The next question is, can you share the link of DevFest? So devfestindia.com is the link as far as I'm aware. Yeah, devfestindia.com. That answers your question, Omkar. Rehan Sheikh has a question. How many years of experience does it require to become a full-fledged cloud engineer? Okay, to be honest, I would say there is no a number that I can provide. I might say that even I'm not a full-fledged cloud engineer, although I have a title of an architect, a senior solutions architect, but I would not consider even having the entire knowledge of cloud. Okay, because it's kind of expanding onto multiple horizons. It's kind of expanding into different domains. So compute is something which I specialize into. I work heavily into. Serverless world is something I heavily work into, but I'm not that experienced with the data engineering platforms or maybe the machine learning side of things. So as a cloud engineer, you have to maybe choose a particular specialization or a particular segment within the cloud platform, while you have an understanding, or you gain an understanding of multiple domains within cloud, and I'm sure you would make a successful career out of it. So to be honest, there is no particular number which I would give in terms of number of years of experience. I would say it's more of a learning journey. Even like maybe after 15 years of experience, I'm still learning different things every day, and it's still evolving. So learning never stops. There's no number to this, to be honest. Rishabh has a question. As a fresher, what all cloud related certifications will be good for us? Okay, great question, Rishabh. So see, as a fresher, I would say there are two major certifications that, from a GCP perspective, there are two major certifications. One is the Associate Cloud Engineer and the Professional Cloud Developer. These are two very beginner level, basic level certifications, and they still hold true for even like almost for an experience range of 0 to 5 years. So somewhere within that range, people prominently apply for these certifications, and it holds value from a career perspective or from a professional journey perspective. Also, these certifications are valid for just 2 years. So If, say, for example, you are in your penultimate or your final year as such, it is good to give that certification now so that it helps you while you are applying for a campus or a job or something, and it would be an added feather on the cap or an added uh, tag on your resume. So associate cloud engineer and the pro cloud developer is something that I would recommend for like freshers. Can you share the link of your YouTube chat? So let me share that with everyone. Let me kind of pull that. Okay. Okay. Meanwhile, let me when I find the link. So this one is the Mumbai channel. You can use this. The next question from Mastan is that is cloud development only limited to a specific programming language, or is there a preferred language for development purposes? So see, when it comes to cloud development, right? So what are you going to develop? So either you're going to develop applications or you're going to um, develop components or scripts from the infrastructure side of things. So when you talk of like infrastructure side of things, you can develop them either in like Python, Go. These are the prominent languages. And when it comes to specific configurations of the infrastructure, there is something called JSON or YAML files which you would need to understand. So it is nothing but a JSON structure that you need to understand properly. And there are its own languages that are coming up. So not languages, but frameworks that are coming up, something called Terraform or Ansible, when it comes to cloud infrastructure side of things. So that is something that you would be using heavily. But if you're talking from the development and specifically in terms of, say, machine learning, APIs or something of that sort, Python would be something of a de facto language that I would consider because of the range of libraries that it provides around these APIs, these ML algorithms and so on. So Python is something that I would vouch for. And if you're talking from an infra side of things, it would be Go and Python both. Okay. All right. Thanks, Mastan. Nishant has another question. Is making artificial intelligence using the API provided by Google possible? Okay. Good. So Nishant, let me ask you first, what do you understand by artificial intelligence? You can type, or if you want, you can come on the chat as well from a speaker. Don't hesitate in answering this. Okay, maybe Nishant is feeling a bit shy, but yes, it's like a baby which develops by self-coding. Okay, so again, you are right, but I mean, I would say close to that, but it is still self-coding is still a far long way to go. Okay. I would say AI is when you write a piece of, so someone has to write that piece first time, correct? Someone has written these ML algorithms, someone has written these APIs, and then it is trying to understand by itself. What do you mean by machine learning? Okay, the machine is trying to train itself to identify certain patterns. Now, what are those patterns? These patterns can be, something of a pattern on text, images, videos, and so on. Now, when you talk of coding, okay, what do you mean by self-coding? So it's not really. I mean, I would say this is more like a myth. It's not like someone would write a code and then the computer itself like comes up with a code that, okay, let's go ahead and destroy the world, or create a third world war or something like that. It's not that easy, and it is not going to happen that way. There are a lot of checks in place. There are a lot of ethical points in place which actually take care of certain things, and which means that artificial intelligence Yes, it would be built eventually, but not at a scale that we talk that okay, it can superimpose on humans as such. So if I talk of, like, let's say the most fundamental thing, right? It can be as simple as a chatbot. Okay, so because I am taking the example of a chatbot because that is the first point which humans feel that the communication process starts with a computer or with a machine. So in that sense, if you say how maturely you kind of develop that chatbot. So say for example, I'm taking your demographics or your profile information, and based on that I try to suggest you that okay, this is the type of books that you like to read, maybe because I have understood certain traits from your profile, certain interests from your profile by picking the certain keywords or certain information about your profile. So I'm trying to understand that what is something that you would like as a person, so that chatbot now suggests you or recommends you that okay, this is something that Nishant might like to read or like to listen as a music or watch a particular show on OTT. So that is like artificial intelligence, where it is evolving, wherein uh, it has to give an ethical experience out of it. It has to be used from an end user or from a consumer centric perspective, and the usage has to matter as such. So there is a lot of talk around, like say for example, something around deep fakes and so on. I won't get into that, but yes, there is a lot of ethical consortium which is also behind this to make AI as much ethical as possible. And there would be obviously like regulations in place. So just try to understand, right? I mean, a few years ago there were like maybe not very strong governments in place. Now there are. Why they are required? Because maybe like we have evolved as intelligent human beings. We want to regulate our folks. Maybe there are different purposes to that. So there would be regulations in place, there would be rules in place for AI to evolve, and it would evolve gradually into those realms rather than just going full blown as a I mean, there might not really be a army of machines to machine war or something like that. I don't see it in a very near or a distant future as such. Uh, Maybe if that happens, I'm not sure. But yes, it is still time to go. We are still evolving as the technology evolves. And AI would be, I'm sure it would be made as much ethical as possible. I hope that answers your question, Nishant, and I took it in the right direction. Okay, thanks, Nishant. Okay. People are asking my LinkedIn account, so it's like linkedin.com// also shared. Okay. Any other questions, folks? Okay, I've just shared my LinkedIn and Twitter credentials. Feel free to connect with me over there. But yeah, I'm still around almost to Ken. If there are any further questions, happy to take them up as well. Okay. I don't see anything coming. Rishabh, if there are no further questions, we can, end up the session. And thank you again for inviting me. I'm reachable on my credentials highlighted on the chat. So feel free to interact. Thanks again, Rishabh, Neetu, and the team at Pillai DSC.
Thank you so much, sir, for the session. I would just like to uh, take a few things before we end the session. I'll just share my screen. Can someone let me know, is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Yes, Rishabh.
Okay. Yeah. So as sir has already told about it, I would like to talk a little bit about DevFest. So DevFest India is the largest annual developer fest that is organized by the Google developer groups across India. So it is a 3-day long event. So in these 3 days, there will be hands-on workshops, roadmaps for beginner developers like us. There will be panel discussions and networking sessions where we can connect with other attendees and speakers. There will also be multiple internships and job postings, and there will be talks about certifications and all, and a lot of swags and goodies giveaways in these 3 days. So it is a very good 3-day long event. So plus it is beginner friendly. So even if you all are new to any particular domain or development in general, you all can attend all these events. And to know more about DevFest, you can just go to devfestindia.com and check it out and register for these events. So it is from 22nd to 24th, and it is from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. on all those 3 days. So just go to devfestindia.com and you can check everything in detail and you can register for it. So after this, I would just like to tell about the upcoming event. So in the next month, we will be having a similar event on Android development. And after this event, we will be starting with the Android Study Jam as well as Google Cloud Study Jam sessions. So after these Study Jam sessions, we will be having multiple hands-on workshops and all. So about this, we will be talking on later on in the next event in detail. So this was all that I wanted to say about. Now I would like to call on our faculty coordinator, Neetu ma'am, to speak a few words.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rishabh. Am I audible, Rishabh?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah. So a beautiful good evening to each and everyone present here. My name is Neetu Pillai, and I'm the faculty coordinator of Google Developer Students Club. It has been a pleasure to host this event on Google Cloud. We have been fortunate to have eminent speaker like Dharmesh Vaya sir for today's session. I would like to express my deep gratitude to our speaker, Mr. Dharmesh Vaya, for accepting our invitation despite of a hectic and demanding schedule. I also owe my gratitude to our Honorable Chairman, Dr. K.M. Vasudevan Pillai, Dr. Priyam Pillai, COO of Mahatma Education Society, Dr. Lata Menon, Deputy CEO of Rasaini Campus, Dr. Jagdish Bakul, PHCET, and Ms. Rohini Bosle, Head of Computer Engineering Department. They all have always motivated us to carry out academic endeavors and have provided with us all the support we needed. Finally, my thanks also go to our fellow colleagues, GDSE Core Committee team, which is our backbone, and last but not least, all the participants who have given their time and support in making this event a big success. Thank you so much, everyone. Once again, thank you so much, Dharmesh sir, for taking your time out from the busy schedule and giving us deep insight about Google Cloud. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks
And-
again, Neetu ma'am. It was a pleasure, speaking at the event and interacting with your folks as such. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, sir. Once again, core committee team, a good work from your end. I'm really proud of you once again. Keep the good work going on.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, Dharmesh sir, for this event. Also, for all the participants, before we conclude the event, I would just like to say you can follow us on all these social medias. And I would also encourage you all to join our Discord server if you are interested in open source development. And if you want to connect with all the GDSC community members, you can join our Discord server. So I would like to call on Sakshi for concluding the event.
Thank you, Rishabh. So, as this session comes to a close, I would like to extend my thanks to Dharmesh sir for giving us a vast knowledge about Google Cloud, and to each one of you for attending, and to the entire team at GDSC and our faculty coordinator Neetu Pillai ma'am for making this event a great success. We hope to see you all in our upcoming events. Till then, stay tuned, guys. And if you have any queries, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.
Guys, feedback form is being circulated in the chat box. Kindly fill the feedback form before you leave the session. Yes, Rishabh, you want to add something?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So with this, I think we conclude our session. We would be coming up more with more intriguing activities for you all. Thank you so much, everyone. Kindly fill the feedback form. Regarding certificates, you need to announce it, right?
Okay, so everyone, I hope everyone had filled the RSVP form, and you all have booked your tickets. So you all just need to fill this Google form, and after you fill the feedback, within a few days you will receive the event certificates. And if you all had not booked your RSVP tickets for this event, make sure from the next event you take your tickets so that you receive all your certificates and everything, all the notes and all.
Yeah, so with this, we conclude our event. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice weekend and enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.